Welcome to the Accounting Technology Lab, brought to you by CPA Practice Advisor, with your hosts, Randy Johnston and Brian Tankersley.
Well, good day. Welcome to the Accounting Technology Lab. I'm Randy Johnston with my co-host, Brian Tankersley, and we wanted to report to you about the 2025 CCH User Conference in San Diego. Now, this conference was October 20 through 23, and it was right on the harbor. As all CCH events go, there was absolutely upscale treatment in this. And this Manchester Hyatt, where the event was held, was pretty nifty. Over the period of time, the reception on the pool deck the first night, the reception the next night on the Carrier Midway for the museum was pretty fabulous. And then the next night, we went to the Gas Lamp District.
So, now, I can't speak to its fabulosity personally because I was not there because I was elsewhere. But Randy assures me that it was purely fabulous.
And Brian has been to pretty much
most of the others.
Yeah,
just not this year.
And I'm one of the few that have been to all of them as an outsider. But, you know, the major themes here, and this is really the big thing we wanted you to be aware of. CCH launched their Access Expert AI, including 5 different modules. And the CEO, Jason Marx, did a keynote emphasizing this shift from automation to orchestration with these tools. And that was kind of a big deal because the company emphasized responsible AI, having secured digital core information for clients and for firms, and that they had tried to continuously reinvent themselves on their platform. I think Jason positioned that well. He also positioned, though, agentic AI as a driver of a competitive advantage. And I think he's correct, or that's true also. Now, he also went on to talk about, several different concepts, including, the need to lead firms and how to redefine your firm and be bold and be enabled in several different concepts. But he yielded the stage then to Brian Diffin and Kathy Rowe. Now, Brian controls the CCH Access infrastructures. Kathy Rowe currently is in charge of the Access tax platforms, and both of them have audit experience in their background. So both are CPAs. And they really proceeded to explain what they were doing with all this agentic AI release. Now, one of the things that they were quite explicit about was end-to-end tax workflows. And this is not like your traditional Access workflow or the old XCM product. It's not that type of thing. This is really automated processes that they're building into the CCH platform. They really truly are agents. And I wish I had the videos to share with our listeners, Brian, because the demo of tax and the demo of audit were both like, that's the deal. That is the real deal. Okay. So now that said, there were 5 different agentic models introduced. And they're all under the brand CCH Expert AI. Now, a couple of comments to set this up. One, many of the attendees wanted to know how much they were going to be, and number 2, when they were shipping. And CCH was not talking about that at the conference. So that was a little out of the ordinary as I would see it. But, when it came down to these different tools, the first one was Access Intelligence, in effect, research that is AI enabled.
But let me say this about AI, okay? When Microsoft launched a Copilot, you'll recall that they pulled it back from big companies and they pulled it back from Microsoft because these tools are hard to get just exactly right. And I have to take my hat off to CCH for not launching something that needs improvement, but rather waiting till they get it right. Because that's with AI, there are things that can happen that they can reach the wrong conclusion. It could leak data, and again, an abundance of caution in the delay is not a bad thing.
Not a bad thing at all. And in fact, there were multiple times where they talked about the importance of being right,
Mhm.
right, which is one of their slogans, but they're really very sincere about that. And the 5 agents that were released, they had confidence that they were good.
Mhm.
In separate side conversations with the management team, they have 25 other agents already written.
Yeah, they have as many agents as the FBI. Good grief.
It's pretty close to it. And they're going to test those during this upcoming tax season. So don't be surprised if there isn't a whole bevy of new agents introduced. But these 5 make pretty good sense. One's built on a platform they had pretty far along. They enabled their portal more, the Access Client Collaboration portal with AI. So that was kind of a big deal. They had announced earlier in the year their K1 product in limited release. They got it fully released here.
Mhm.
So the K1 scan product is an AI-enabled product. Then the next one was the end-to-end audit. And that was fascinating because there were multiple steps in the audit process shown,
Mhm.
and it was dominantly built around their access engagement style. Not a lot of third party, at least it didn't feel like it to me. And it's like, wait a minute, I hadn't seen anything like this in the demonstrations we've seen
Mhm.
of CCH Access Audit up to this point. And then, finally, they had the new Access Advisor, an advisory platform. So, 5 different offerings on multiple fronts, because if you think about it, research, portal, scan, uh, audit, and then, of course,
Advisory.
the advisory piece. So they had pretty much all the fronts covered with their announcements. Oh, by the way, the tools that they introduced last year on practice management, the Access IQ and all that, that was all also formally released. But the next, and I went to a lot of sessions, and I taught a lot of sessions, Brian, in San Diego. But one that I attended, a 100-minute session, I was more than over the top impressed. Fabio from their AI team out of Switzerland, who lives kind of a Swiss-Italy border, came across, and he presented with a Microsoft employee on MPCs. MPCs are basically the technology that allow you to interface to the databases in a secure, role-based fashion. So what they're enabling and had running at the conference was an MPC for the entire CCH Access platform. So rather than using the application program interfaces that we're used to, MPCs allow AI tools to talk directly. So it's kind of an API for
Now,
AIs.
Now, is this model protocol context? Is that what it is? Okay.
And so we're going to see MPCs in lots of fashions. In fact, you and I are planning to create an MPC course for K2 in the coming year. So we'll talk about any vendor that has an MPC model and how you get to it. But what they then proceeded to do, which was even more fascinating, they built 5 agents live in front of the audience during the session. So they spent about half the session explaining, and then probably built an agent about every 10 minutes for the rest of the session. And they were building them on the fly. Sure, they had practice, but Fabio had actually told me in advance he was going to build all of them using ChatGPT methodologies. And he said about a week before the conference, he said because of the Claude integration into Copilot, he decided he'd use the Claude approaches instead. So he did Claude builds on these agents, and they were stunningly well done. So for an MPC, probably the best way for you to think about it is it's like exposing all the data, but controlling who can see the data. And then, you use it in the way that you want. So again, I don't want to understate or overstate what happened. This event had a lot of roundtable events, small discussion groups. Most of the time on CCH this time, they were doing about 3 tables in a room, but they'd do some specific topic. And the interactions there, because I did sit in on 2 or 3 of those, were really interesting. But I also sat in on Access tax training, the Access audit platform training, all of the products that were kind of new. I wanted to see how they were different. And, these things were fairly feature complete.
Mhm.
Didn't see a lot of shift in access tax this year, for example, but good improvements in access engagement. So
But they still have what, 3,400 forms in access, 3,415, I think was the number that Brian quoted us, that they have in access tax. So it's a lot.
it is.
No, actually, they're over 4,000, aren't they?
I was going to say, I think that they're
you're right.
pushing 4,500.
You're right.
So, a very robust tax platform, but overall, the event and the vendors that were there, the attendees that were there, it was a fairly, like CCH conferences usually are, fairly high-end deal. Now, next year, they're going to return to Orlando. So they're going back to properties that they've been at before. And I'm anxious to see how that all comes out, but that's what we saw. And again, without Brian being there, because I felt bad. There were several times
I trust you on the fabulosity. I'm sure it was fabulous.
I get that, but a lot of people ask where you were at, and I said, "Well, yeah, poor guy. He was like working."
I was out telling jokes somewhere. I can't remember where it was. But,
Yeah.
it's a hard world for us out of work comedians, Randy.
Yeah, it is. Well, that's kind of the quick summary of what we saw at the CCH User Conference this year. And one final admonition: if you have any CCH products in your firm, we do believe it's worth the time and money to send at least one of your team, if not more than one, to the event that they held each year. Many of the firms here had 6 and 7 people from the firm trying to cover all the different topics. And that's a pretty good strategy.
And I will say this, as somebody that, because I started my career leaving accounting largely and doing a lot of CPA firm tech starting in 1999. And I can tell you that one of the hardest things for anybody at a mid-sized accounting firm like I was is to figure out how to find out and know what you don't know by having people to call and having connections that can help you solve problems that are extremely time sensitive. And this is a great way to build out your network and to create those connections with both people with the vendors and people with the exhibitors, because I'm sure they had a lot of other companies there, because I think Bill Cornfield from WSG went and a lot of others were there. But I will say that the title connections I think is important, because even if you're at a massive firm like a Witham or a CRI or somebody like that, you still don't know what you don't know, because the organization size even of a top 10 firm, if you're not one of the big four are, some of the big four are as big as just about everybody else from firm 5 to 100. And so the thing is that it's really critical that you create this community so that you can be successful and you can help others and they can help you, because nobody gets to this world by themselves.
And as has been the case in all prior years, almost every significant CCH top level employee was there. So you got to meet a lot of the product managers and people who could actually make things happen. And they were listening carefully, because I noticed this time they were very intent on hearing what users had to say. Yes. Maybe even more so than any other year.
So the people I know that are successful at these vendor conferences will make a list of the things that they want to accomplish and the people that they want to meet. And many times they will even set up appointments in advance. If you're having problems with GoFileRoom, find Louis, find somebody that runs support for GoFileRoom, and you can actually meet these people face to face, describe your problems, and they'll not GoFileRoom, but you get the idea. Not Louis either. God, I guess I need to pull that whole thing out. But you can meet, again, the people that run the infrastructure, like Brian Diffin, and you can meet Kathy Rowe and shake her hand and talk to her. And I will say this, that with Kathy and her team, they're very good at responding to these kinds of situations. And you've got a real opportunity here to make those contacts and to make those deposits, so that when you're up against it, you have somebody to call, and you at least can get somebody that can help you get a plan when you don't know what you don't know.
Yeah, absolutely right. And I was just thinking about the panel experience that I had, because I was invited to be on a panel here, Brian. And throughout the conference, there's been three or four things that I learned that I'm still mulling and saying, I wonder if this is a shift that's occurred. And I'm just going to call this one out from the panel. The claim was made by CCH product managers that the use of AI is going to be verbal. We're going to speak to these platforms and it'll just drop us right into the platform for what we're needed to use. So the importance of the user interface might be less than it used to be. Conceptually, that's very interesting. And I've heard that repeated by others since the CCH User Conference at this point. And so things like that just help you think things through differently. Like you say, you don't know what you don't know.
Alexa, prepare my PBC list for my accountant.
Yeah, exactly. All right. Well, very good. All right. Well, that being the case, we appreciate your time here on the Accounting Technology Lab, and you have a really good day.
Thank you for sharing your time with us. We'll be back next Saturday with a new episode of the Technology Lab from CPA Practice Advisor. Have a great week.